Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Dear children, how have you been during the last month? I hope you are doing very good. So, dear children, we have been talking about these teachings of the Lord Buddha, and we were actually applying them in our day-to-day life. That is what makes us liberated and free from the suffering once and for all. So, dear children, out of the teachings that we have been talking so far, how much of it were you able to put into practice? That is the question that we all have to ask from ourselves. That is what we ask from ourselves as the disciples of the Lord Buddha. We always ask ourselves, how much of the teachings that we have learned so far are we actually able to put into practice? And are we really doing it? Because as much as we do, we get relieved of suffering. Otherwise, we wouldn't have realized that we were actually suffering. For example, let's just imagine that we are suffering from a headache that we have been having for ever since that we were born to this world. How do we know that we have such a headache? For example, let's say we have never been relieved of that pain ever before. So continuously we have been having it. How do we know that we have such a headache? Do you have any chance to know that you are suffering from a headache? What do you think? I don't think that you will be able to understand that you are suffering from a headache because you have never had any experience without that headache. If you have had, then of course you can see that this is a headache. But you don't have anything to compare with because continuously you have been having it. Therefore, you don't perceive it as a headache. You consider it as part and parcel of yourself. This is who I am. This is how I feel. Therefore, dear children, if we have been having something ever since that we were born to this world, we are completely insensitive to it. Therefore, we don't know whether it is part of suffering or not, because we have taken it for granted. We perceive it as part of our life. My dear children, the suffering that we are trying to eradicate is also like that. It costs us a lot of merit to understand that this is a part of suffering that we are going to eradicate. Dear children, it is said that this merit is like the universal currency because it costs you everything to understand these teachings of the Buddha. My dear children, if you think that there are multiple currencies in this world, and you can convert among them as well. And what do you think is the most powerful currency? Right? So people can say that there are various currencies in this world, and people say that one currency is better than the other, right? But there is a universal currency, which is common to all worlds, not only for the human world. For the entirety of this universe and even beyond, there is a universal currency. That is none other than the merits. Dear children, it costs us a lot of merit to understand this Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, because this is something that we have never heard in our entire samsara. We may have heard it, but we never were able to understand and comprehend it and to convince of this. How do we know? Because if we have ever understood it, if we have ever convinced of the Dhamma, we wouldn't come this far along the samsara. The fact that we have been coming in this samsara proves itself that we were never able to comprehend and convince of the teachings of the Buddha. Therefore, we have to engage in much merits as we can, and out of the power of the merits that we do, we may be able to understand and be convinced of these teachings. That is why each and every discussion that we have had so far, at the end of it, we do a brief transfer of merits, because we take a firm resolve. By transferring merits, we resolve that through the power of these merits, if any of our friends and family who have predeceased us, if any of them have been born in the woeful plains, we help them by transferring those merits because they need our help. We were also helped by our relatives who transferred merits when we were desperate. That is why we got this chance, my dear children. This is how we should help each other. If we do not help each other, who else would? Therefore, with a mind which is a grateful mind is required to understand and comprehend this Dhamma. Therefore, transcendental merit itself will gain you a lot of merits. You have done so much of merits throughout the day, and at the end of the day, if you transfer those merits to all who you consider as affectionate to you, your family members, your mother, father, and siblings, and your relatives, and to your friends, and everyone that surrounds you, if you can really be grateful towards all of them, now you are gleaming with the gratefulness. Such a mind is able to convince this Dhamma, because that mind is so happy and it is devoid of any regret and of suffering. Such a mind is required to understand this Dhamma. So, my dear children, it is essential for us to engage in merits, because it's only the power of merit that helps us to proceed through this journey of understanding the Dhamma. So we were talking about the currencies. Of course, the power of merit, or the merit, is the universal currency, which is common to all worlds. So Lord Buddha has described about this world, about this universe, and it is made out of 31 realms, and human world is just one out of them. So we'll discuss more about it later in our discussions. So for the time being, let's just imagine that human world is not the only world, and there are other 30 realms apart from the human world. And to all those realms, the universal currency is the merit. And if you have good amount of merits, you are less likely to suffer. But dear children, do you think that if you have gained a lot of merits, so now you can relieve yourself out of suffering for the entirety and eternally? Unfortunately not. Merit is important, of course, it is essential for us to comprehend the Dhamma, but that is not all about it. We have to listen to the Dhamma, and merits will pave us the way to that. But when we listen to Dhamma, we have to practice it. Without practicing the teachings that we are learning, it wouldn't relieve us from the suffering. Therefore, that is why I asked you the question in the beginning, are we really practicing the Dhamma or the teachings that we learn? So, if we do so, we will get the experience. What experience am I talking about? So, that experience of without having the headache, you will briefly experience it for a short period, very short period. Then, now you have the evidence. Without having the headache, now you know, aha, this must be a headache. Because I got this experience without the headache. Therefore, this should be able to eradicate. Therefore, I have to eradicate this and get free from this headache, which is not part of my life. Therefore, dear children, if we practice the teachings, then we have the experience for ourselves without the suffering. So, just imagine, dear children, if we have a secret to protect, if we have something to protect, would you like that feeling? Don't you like to be free? Just imagine when you have something that you don't like to tell and share with your parents. What a burden that is. You don't like that feeling, do you? Because you want to disclose everything with your parents, and that lightness, that calmness and that fulfilling nature in your mind, you really like that, because you don't have any secrets with your parents, and you don't need to as well. That is the freedom. Don't you think so? If you have some secret to protect with your mind, that is a burden, and you wouldn't like that feeling. That is why we always encourage you to expose everything with your parents, because they know the best for you, because they guard you. That is why they are called your parents. Dear children, if you have something to protect, of course you will suffer. But people in this day and age, they always say that if you want to be happy, collect things for yourself. The more you have, the more you'll be happy. Unfortunately, my dear children, that is not the case. If you have more things, you will have more things to protect, and you have more things to get in touch with. That means you have more things to pay your attention to, and you have to protect them out of danger, out of theft, and you have to safeguard everything, and you have to take measures to protect them, and you have to maintain them as well. So such a lot of time, energy, and money, many things you'll have to pay. Dear children, if you have the most required things, then you have less number of requirements. Then the lesser that you have belongings to yourself, the happier would be. Therefore, dear children, if you really understand these teachings as well as if you practice these, then you will feel the freedom that we are talking about. When you feel such freedom, dear children, you will never feel the urge to collect things for yourself. Because you have seen for a fact that the happiness is not embedded with these objects. Right? My dear children, if we have really understood this, you wouldn't need the requirement of an object to be happy. Because anyway, you are happy. Your happiness can never be challenged. Your happiness will never be lessened by the people or the things which happens around you. And your happiness will be unchallengeable, and it will be unconditional. That is why we call the happiness that we seek for as unconditional happiness, because it doesn't depend on any conditions. Would you like to feel such a happiness? You are anyway happy, and your happiness can never be challenged. That is the happiness that we all look forward to. And if you have enjoyed it at least for once, you will feel the difference. You will feel the difference with the happiness that you have enjoyed so far and with the unconditional happiness. Therefore, my dear children, we will help you throughout this series. We will help you how to reach the goal of unconditional happiness. And when you have reached it, you will know what I am talking about and what we all are talking about. All the disciples of the Lord Buddha, which means the Mahasangha, they talk about this kind of happiness. Therefore, we invite you to get in touch with us and get in touch with this series and try to put them into practice, and you will feel the difference for yourself. But for that, of course, we have to have developed a grateful mind. If we can be grateful towards others, then such a mind will be able to understand this truth, understand these teachings of the Buddha. Because only a grateful mind, which can appreciate the sacrifice made by others, can understand this. That is why we always encourage you to appreciate the others, not just for the sake of appreciating it from the bottom of your heart. If you can really do that from the bottom of your heart, you're truly inspirational to others as well as for yourself. And you are a great human being. You become a great human being. And that greatness will pave you the path towards the liberation. Okay, my dear children, with that note, I would like to conclude our discussion for today. So in a nutshell, we talked about the importance of putting into practice what we learn. And we know that it is essential for us to engage in the merits, and we talked about the importance of doing merits, and that merits will pave us the way towards our liberation, as well as becoming a grateful person towards all other sentient beings. Because if you can really appreciate the sacrifice made by others, you have a grateful mind, which is an essential component to be convinced of these teachings. Once we are ready with our equipment, which is the mind, a grateful mind, which can appreciate the sacrifice made by others, you have all the requirement for you to understand and comprehend the Dhamma, which will convince you of the truth, and you will be able to see the world, which is the same world, but in a completely different point of view. So, dear children, I hope you have had some kind of input towards your life, and with this knowledge, because this background knowledge is a must, we must practice, put into practice these things, and with that knowledge, you'll be able to discuss more advanced teachings of the Buddha, and of course we will have a small step at once, and little by little we will dig deep to the deeper concepts which are taught by the Lord Buddha. For now, have a little bit of patience, and in this series, right, we are targeting at you, who are our dear children, who have been listening to this series ever since, and we will deliver this to the amount that you can comprehend. Small chunks, because it is essential, not to just by heart the Dhamma, the teachings. We are not targeting at the knowledge, we are targeting at the liberation. We have to put them into practice. That is why we give only small bit of chunks at once. My dear children, I really want you all to relieve of this suffering, because you don't have to cry hereafter, because the Sambuddha Shasana still prevails. You live in such an era, and you are destined for this, and you deserve this, because you have been born as a human being in this era. That is why that we have these kinds of sessions for you, because your merits are so powerful, and your power of merit has made you to listen to this, and these words will resonate in your hearts and minds, and you will look for your freedom. So with that note, we will conclude our today's discussion, and as we discussed earlier, let us transfer the merits that we have acquired by listening to these teachings, and as well as by engaging in very meritorious deeds that you have been doing so far. So may through the power of these merits, if any of our ancestors have been born in the woeful planes, may they redeem themselves and be born in the blissful planes. And may through the power of these merits, may they abstain from unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.